Hi again, it's Ike. We're on page 11 of First Sun and Sword. We're in the city again, working on those environments and perspectives and everything.
Okay, working on a scene where our son and sword are walking through the city still. So we had the first page already of this scene. They're clearly walking into a city. I guess I do feel the need to comment more on the storytelling aspect of what I'm doing with these pages. And I haven't done a lot of that. It's more like visual storytelling, sure, and visual things, but the actual, story, writing. So I think I'll take that approach with this video. In the last page I drew, the last video, you've got this new scene, and we've already set up that it's Crocodile City. It's a dangerous place, and Sword is insisting on taking Sun with him for some purpose, and is insisting on protecting him. He owes him a blood debt. He feels compelled to take care of this boy, and Farah has been resistant. She's the sidekick, right? So she's challenging him on his choice, but is always loyal. But she's not with them when they enter the city, so I don't think that's going to be confusing for the reader. I think it'll just be interesting. I think it'll work out. But they were all going to enter the city together, and now you got Sun and Sword, and I actually snuck into the background in these panels as they walk through the city. Farah is cloaked, but she is in the background in a few panels, so it's like she is just their guardian angel. She's just watching from a different perspective and not being seen with them to help with how they're trying to sneak into the city and not draw attention, because they know that the Lizard King, the real big bad guy, is looking for Sun and Sword, and that Sword's in trouble here. And some of that's already been established just in the bare bones minimum here of why they're here. So we walk into this city. It is a busy hub. It is the rubble of a greater human civilization that had big defenses, big statues, and now it's a marketplace with lots of activity, but it has a heavy police presence, and it is run by a lizard man, King Croc, and the city has canals running through it filled with crocodiles. And so there's definitely the sense of history with this, the sense of a lot of hustle bustle and decay of a civilization. And Sword is going to comment on these things to Sun. So we've got we've got some things that the audience, the reader, is going to learn about the world while they walk through it. Now, I'm trying to keep the world interesting, and that the visuals, it's not simply two characters walking from point A to point B. Now, I was hesitant on that because there is quite a bit of that being all that's happening for a page. Luckily not for page after page, but yeah, I was hesitant to just have characters walking from point A to point B, but it's, how many layers can I add to that? How interesting can I make that? I've already set up that there's danger, and I've set up the presence of the soldiers from page one, the sense that a fight could come. And I'm doing the world building, and the illustrations are not simply, characters walking A to B, point A to point B. It's showing you what the world looks like and giving you those details that bring it to life and make it interesting. And Sword's going to do some exposition to talk about the world and how he sees it. So again, it's not just exposition, not just him saying how he sees the world, but it shows how he wants to instill something in this boy that he just can't help himself but be like a father figure, and want to share his wisdom. And he's got his own issues with his father, that'll come up as the story, and his identity. So I've got something worked out for him and his character arc and his development. And so I already have that working into how he's interacting with Sun. And as he talks about the world, you see more about what's important to him, what he values, what he doesn't like, and maybe even a sense of how he's avoiding a problem that's root to him. And I'm not avoiding spoilers, but I don't want to go in great detail at this moment about what his issues are with his father and everything. But I am not primarily a writer. I mean, I guess I am. I guess you would say that, but I clearly want to draw the stories and draw comics, and I wouldn't mind drawing something that someone else wrote if it was something I really liked. But the writing is important to me. I do want to tell good stories, and really what drew me to drawing comics, and picking that back up in my late 20s after taking a break, what really drew me to it was I wanted to tell stories. Like I loved making student films and coming up with ideas of stories, but I would never, draw them all the way out and write them. And now, now I do, but I do it through this medium of comics. So that really pushed me and drove me to get better and keep practicing at my drawing for the purpose of storytelling in comic books. And got me to a place where I'm like, oh, I'm an illustrator. Like I accept that identity, but it was only through that route to get to that point. So back to the story here. So I've got several panels where there's a lot of walking through the city, and there's all sorts of considerations on how to keep that interesting, both in the story, in the dialogue, in the visuals. I've got in the first panel I have Sun and Sword walking, away from the camera. They're walking back, and then in the next one they're walking left to right. Even in the first one, it's slightly left to right, and I do generally agree with moving left to right as people read. Even in films, it feels like people are going forwards in a left to right direction across the screen. So yeah, trying to keep it interesting, mix it up. And they're not just walking through space after space that's the same. When they approach the city gate, it is a different world. And then here on this panel, it already feels very different than the two panels before it. So it's not just, walking. It's each panel is taking you somewhere new. And it has to feel like the same city, and there's little ideas I have of architectural elements and things that unify this city, but the truth is I am making this up as I go. Besides like some of the studying I did ahead of time, looking at ancient architecture for different cities and stuff. There's I found lots of. I'll just even tell you some of it. There are 3D renderings of Rome and places that were developed by certain organizations or nonprofits, but there's also video games, and the Assassin's Creed games are great at giving reasonably researched environments that feel like a city, feel like people doing things. And, why not take some of those ideas? And it is secondhand. You could do all that research yourself, but But if you can see it in a movie, like, if you're doing something in Rome and you watch Gladiator to get ideas of like what Rome would look like and stuff, like, that's okay. You don't want to heavily sample from just one source, but you can glean from that. So for me, I collected pictures from multiple sources of different cities and different environments, and then I drew pictures of what I was seeing, like did some studies, but then I also drew pictures from imagination, pulling together different elements. And then when I sit down to draw the page or to do the thumbnail, I'm not really referencing anything at that point besides my own studies, and sometimes not referencing anything at all but my memory. And that's the ideal for me, is when I can just sit down and make it up. It takes some work to get to that point, but it pays off. Like, that's the invisible work you're doing. Because, if you worked on drawing in a certain style, getting some kind of style down where people could see that, and you'd get a lot more likes, you'd get a lot more praise for being able to draw that figure that way or whatever. And there's a lot to learn in that. But what I'm saying here is the process of learning about the world and studying it and drawing pieces of it, you're not going to get as much praise for that. Like, it's not as glamorous. It's not as pretty to look at because the drawings can look rough, but you're doing the work. You're doing the hard work that will pay off later. And so I encourage people to do that. And it's not glamorous, and it's not necessarily fun either to put work into that. So I like to do that when I'm about to start a project, because I'm the most motivated to want to get started on that project, and I'm excited about the story and stuff. So I'm going to put that work in and be motivated to do it then. But then, like, later, especially halfway through a story, it's no fun to stop and be like, okay, I need to research for this next scene. So I tried to research everything I needed for the issue before I even started drawing it. As I'm looking at where I'm laying these shadows, some thoughts come to mind about placing shadows, and I don't want to fall off track though with storytelling, but I will mention, for my style, when you break down to just white and black, and I use color, but it's substantially mostly just there's black and there's white to indicate, in shadow or in the light. And because of that, I get to make decisions about what is fully in shadow. What we could say, what hits that cutoff in the picture you're seeing of where's the cutoff where things are dark enough in shadow that they're black, between the color that they are and the amount of light that's reflecting off of them, and, the shadow that they're in. Where's that cutoff where that's just going to be black? And there's other things that you're taking into account too, that where's sometimes I'll put things fully in black, not because they don't just meet a cutoff of getting darker, but they're darker in contrast to the thing next to them. If they're next to a bright area, then I can put more black. Also, if they're closer to the camera, then they're going to have greater contrast than things far away. But things far away could still be black. They could be dark. If like in a dark room, things farther away are still dark because there's no light. There's no contrast, and it's just dark. So there's the idea of like the edge between gradations, or like the edge of a shadow. Might be a spot where I'm gonna start heavy blacks versus the light areas, and then but there's play in it. there's so much you can get away with. Like, you need to understand form and shadow, but you're not strictly telling yourself, well, the sun's up here in the upper right and it's at this angle, so all these things are in shadow. Boom, done. It's not that simple. Not when you're working abstractly in, heavy white and black, especially then. You have a lot of play because there's secondary lighting. There's light from the sun, but then there's light, refracting through the sky, through the atmosphere or the clouds, off of light, secondary light coming off of the ground or other buildings that are going to hit that. Like, they're not totally dark. We're not in outer space where what's in the sunlight is bright and the other side of it's like pitch black. It's because there's no secondary light in certain situations, like in outer space, in certain places. So because of that, you can throw shadow to indicate form and to draw the eye and things like that, rather than strictly where the light sources are. Maybe like one way to put that is, rather than thinking about leaving things white where the light hits and everything else is dark, I tend to think in terms of dark. Rather than thinking in terms of light versus shadow, I think in terms of gradations of shadow. Or my focus is more on that. I don't know if that makes sense, but the point is, you're not focused on, you're not just making your decision based on what the light hits, what the main light source hits. Okay. And now you get to see more clearly what those choices are that I made of what's solid and black, and what I took liberties to give highlights on and things like that. It's an art, not a science. Yeah. Going through and cleaning up, it's a little bit rougher in lines that I lay down and quick, and I find that it's almost better for me to let it be a little rougher and quicker and then go back and clean it up later than to try to get it perfect to start with, because it'll just take too long and the work will suffer. It'll look less energetic and stuff. So there is a balance there, that some going back and cleaning up, throwing in whiteout, it is not a failure, like, because it can feel like you're just failing, and that's why you got to go back. But that's not necessarily true, depending on your perspective, your goal. Yeah, there's a struggle here with there's a struggle with how many little details to put in. Sometime I'll have to talk about when I decide to put, little lines to indicate texture or stonework and different things like that. And where I choose to place those. Similar to the discussion on shadows and lighting. Yeah, storytelling, here's this guy walking towards the camera carrying a paper. He's not important to the story. He is just a background, character that's... So I threw him in shadow, he's in shadow and not very clear, partly because I don't want you to look at him too much. I just want him to be a shape framing the characters, making it feel like the world's, a real world. I did have to make up like a little bit of alphabet. So I was looking at like before our alphabet, what some of those, it's after cuneiform, but it's before like a real alphabet that the Greeks adopted. And just kind of like looking at those shapes and throwing my own symbols up that kind of emulate those shapes. And I'm not worried about building like a real clear world that actually makes sense when it comes to those details of language and stuff. I just want it to feel like something. Yeah, still cleaning up. And this is on high speed. So, yeah, I probably spent a little more time cleaning up than I prefer on this page. Part of that is my whiteout pen was not cooperating. After this, I believe I cleaned it, washed the parts so that it would, so that it would work better. I've grown fond of Sun having like kind of a missing tooth, but that might be a little different than how he looked in previous pages. But he was small enough on the page. Like I think it's okay for it to sometimes be clear and sometimes not. So far, I've been saying he's 11 years old, but I think he should be more like 10 or even 9, but 10 might be better, yeah. It's tricky, too, because, like, the way I see it with the diet he had back then and so on, like, he might be developmentally more like a 9-year-old at age 11. And there's the finished page. Thanks for hanging out and watching it. Spent some time talking about story, about like where I choose to put these shadows. Hopefully my thoughts are insightful or helpful to you. I'm going to keep making these pages and these videos and sharing thoughts. And I do want to make videos on other things than just me drawing these pages, but I'm going to need to make the time to do that. And other sorts of videos like talking on a topic or talking about the writing and showing my writing process and stuff like that. But for now, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.